In this episode, we're going to catch up on what's happening in the Islamic world, or Dar al Islam, the abode or home of Islam. You've already read about the foundation of the religion of Islam and the teachings of Muhammad, the prophet chosen by God to carry messages from on high through the angel Gabriel to man. Like Christianity and Buddhism, Islam is a radical reforming religion. It challenged established norms and modes of society in order to reform it and make it better, and in many ways, more universally equal. After Muhammad's death, there were fractures in his followers over who should succeed him, which gave rise to the two major sects of Islam, the Sunni and the Shia. Sunnis believed that the most meritorious person should succeed Muhammad as leader of the Ummah, while the Shia believed that it should follow through Muhammad's bloodline, whose leadership was cut short through assassination. The majority of believers professed the Sunni version of Islam, and it was the Sunni who went on to found first the Umayyad, and then, after 750, the Abbasid Caliphate. A caliphate is a pretty close analogy of a kingdom. A king rules a kingdom, and a caliph rules a caliphate. One of the major differences between the Christian states of Europe and the Islamic empires of the Middle East is that Christian kings in Europe were subordinate to the leaders of the church and had to be approved by them in order to gain their legitimacy. In the caliphate, the caliph assumed the role of both political and spiritual leader, just like Muhammad had done. By the time we're catching up with the Abbasid Caliphate, though, their greatest achievements are notably behind them. But before we destroy the Abbasids, let's talk about their highlights. The Abbasid Caliphate's capital was at Baghdad in modern-day Iraq. It was both an architectural and an intellectual wonder. Persian engineers had made the desert fertile with an advanced irrigation system. All the major trade routes of the Silk Road passed through it. It was situated between two major rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, and it was home to the House of Wisdom, essentially a modern university, which housed traveling and native scholars, major translation and archival rooms, conference halls for debates and presentations, and so on. Algebra and trigonometry were invented in the Islamic heartland, and scholars like Nasir al-Din al-Tusi, the creator of trigonometry, and Ibn Sina, who wrote the Canon of Medicine. It also housed major works by Greek and Roman thinkers, while these ideas were being persecuted in Europe. The House of Wisdom, like the Abbasid Caliphate, was destroyed by the Mongols during the sack of Baghdad in 1258. After the destruction of the Abbasid Caliphate, the Islamic world sees the rise of a variety of Central Asian, ethnically Turkic states that grow, swell, and diminish over the centuries. One of the most important of these successor states is the Delhi Sultanate, which emerges from Central Asia down into India, spreading Islam into the core of Hinduism. The arrival of Islam into India would have far-reaching consequences. The rulers and armies of the Delhi Sultanate were not gentle with their conquest and not accommodating of Hindu practices. In many ways, Hinduism and Islam are very, very disparate religions. Whereas Hinduism is generally considered polytheistic, believing in a multitude of gods and goddesses, Islam is passionately monotheistic. I mean, the first pillar of Islam is the Shahada. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. So that was a big point of contention. But it gets worse. Hinduism strictly enforces a social hierarchy with different roles and different access for different levels. Islam preaches the inherent equality of all believers before God, eschewing the strict caste system of India. Furthermore, Hindu temples, the homes of the gods, complete with cult statues to pray to and decorated often in erotic images, were anathema, or absolutely unacceptable to Muslim belief and practice. Like Judaism and Christianity, Islam follows a strict anti-idolatry policy and also supports modesty in terms of relations between men and women and the showing of female bodies, characteristics not shared in Hindu art and architecture. These differences led to the destruction of temples, statues, and even priests as the Delhi Sultanate swept to power in northern India. While many low-caste Hindus sought refuge from the caste system, there wasn't a large conversion rate, and only max 25% of Indians converted to Islam. Despite that, Muslim dynasties would continue to rule India from 1206 to the middle of the 1700s, when Great Britain would negotiate as much power away from the remaining Muslim Mughal emperors as they could. The most significant of the Turkic or third wave Islamic empires, however, is the Ottoman Empire. Growing out of a small family in Central Asia to threaten the once mighty Byzantine Empire in the Eastern Mediterranean, the Ottoman Empire will be the longest lived and most powerful successor state of Muhammad. A multi-ethnic trading powerhouse, the Ottoman Empire continued to control the trade routes, the seas, the engineering, and the prestige of the world for over 500 years. We'll talk more about this empire in a later unit, but it's important to know now that the developments in the Islamic world went from looking like the end after conquest by the Mongols to really rising from the ashes in the Mediterranean and India as we move closer to the year 1450.